Have you ever felt guilty without knowing what you did wrong? Have you ever felt watched without anyone actually looking at you? Have you ever tried to explain yourself and realized the explanation didn't matter? That's where Kafka begins. Not with monsters, not with violence, not with horror, but with a feeling. A quiet, suffocating feeling that something is wrong, and it's probably your fault, even if no one tells you why. Franz Kafka did not invent anxiety. He simply described it before we had the language for it, before psychology gave it terms, before self-help tried to manage it, before social media amplified it. Kafka wrote about the inner courtroom long before we admitted it existed. When people call Kafka absurd, they usually mean the events make no sense. A man wakes up as an insect. Another is arrested without charges. Another searches endlessly for permission to enter a system that never responds. But Kafka was never interested in absurd events. He was interested in emotional logic. The logic of fear, the logic of shame, the logic of silent accusation. In The Trial, Joseph K. is arrested. No explanation, no clear accusation, no visible crime. He asks what he has done. No one answers. He tries to defend himself. No one listens. The system moves forward as if guilt were already established. And that is the horror. Not punishment, not prison, but accusation without clarity. Because when the accusation is unclear, you begin to search inside yourself. And when you search inside yourself long enough, you will always find something to blame. Kafka understood something deeply unsettling. Human beings do not need a real crime to feel guilty. We only need the possibility that we have failed an invisible standard. And invisible standards are the most powerful ones, because you cannot argue with them. That feeling is deeply modern. You scroll through your phone. You compare yourself to others. You measure your success, your body, your productivity. No judge appears, no verdict is spoken. And yet, you feel behind. You feel inadequate. You feel evaluated. Kafka recognized this psychological mechanism a century ago. The system in The Trial is not just bureaucracy, it is internalized judgment. It is the mind turned against itself. It is the voice that whispers, "You should be doing better," even when no one is watching. Now consider the metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa wakes up as an insect. The transformation is shocking, grotesque, almost surreal. But notice what Gregor worries about first. Not his body, not his survival. He worries about being late for work. He worries about disappointing his boss. He worries about being a burden to his family. Even as an insect, his identity is defined by usefulness. Kafka isn't writing fantasy. He's writing about conditional worth, about the fear that once you stop functioning, you stop being valuable. Gregor does not rage against his fate. He apologizes for it. And that may be the most devastating detail of all. Because anxiety often doesn't scream, it apologizes. Kafka's characters rarely rebel. They internalize. They assume the fault is theirs, even when the world is irrational, especially when the world is irrational. And this is what makes Kafka feel personal, because we recognize that reflex. When something goes wrong, we search for our mistake. When something is unclear, we assume we misunderstood. When authority is silent, we blame ourselves for not understanding the rules. In The Castle, the protagonist tries to gain access to a mysterious authority. He sends messages. He waits. He seeks approval. The responses are unclear, contradictory, endless. The authority is distant but omnipresent. You are always being processed, never resolved. Kafka captures a specific kind of anxiety, the anxiety of systems. Systems that do not shout, systems that do not threaten, systems that simply exist, cold, procedural, impersonal. You don't fight them. You adapt to them. You question yourself instead. Why does this feel like a bad dream? Because in dreams, the rules are unstable. You are accused, but you don't know why. You run, but you don't know from what. You try to speak, but your voice feels small. You try to explain, but the explanation dissolves. Kafka replicates dream logic, not through fantasy, through emotional distortion. Time feels stretched. Space feels claustrophobic. Authority feels undefined. And the self feels fragile. Dreams remove clarity. Kafka removes clarity. And without clarity, control disappears. Kafka's genius was psychological restraint. He does not explain the system. He does not reveal the crime. He does not solve the mystery. Because the mystery is not external, it is internal. The unease remains unresolved, just like in real life, just like in anxiety. Because anxiety does not give you answers, it gives you scenarios. It gives you possibilities. It gives you the constant sense that something might be wrong. What makes Kafka deeply modern is not bureaucracy. It is self-surveillance. We live in a world where you track your steps, you track your productivity, you track your attention, you monitor your habits, you measure your value constantly. No court summons arrives, and yet you feel evaluated. You feel visible. You feel assessed. That is Kafka's world. Not absurd, accurate. There is another layer. Kafka's characters often accept their fate, not because they agree with it, but because resistance feels pointless. That quiet resignation is perhaps the most disturbing element of all. Not rebellion, not chaos, just compliance. Anxiety does not always explode. Sometimes it stabilizes. Sometimes it becomes normal. Sometimes it becomes identity. So why does Kafka feel like a bad dream you can't wake up from? Because his stories do not collapse into clarity. They refuse comfort. They refuse explanation. They refuse resolution. And we are not used to that. We are used to stories that reassure us, stories that restore order, stories that tell us what the problem was and how it was solved. Kafka offers none of that. He offers exposure. He shows us a world where the accusation is vague, the authority is distant, and the guilt feels internal. And here is the unsettling possibility. What if the system in Kafka's stories is not outside you? What if it's already inside? What if the judge is not a court official, but your own internal voice? What if the accusation is simply the fear that you are not enough? Kafka doesn't create anxiety, he reveals it. And maybe that's why his stories feel unbearable, because they don't exaggerate, they clarify. They remove the illusion that someone will eventually explain the rules. In Kafka's world, you are responsible without ever being informed. And that is disturbingly close to modern life. We are constantly measured, constantly visible, constantly evaluated, and yet rarely certain what the standards actually are. Kafka understood something brutal. The most powerful systems are the ones you enforce on yourself. The most exhausting trials are the ones inside your head. And the most persistent nightmares are the ones that feel logical. That is why you can't wake up. Because the dream is not irrational. It is structured. It is procedural. It is quiet. And it sounds suspiciously like your own thoughts. Kafka didn't write monsters. He wrote mirrors. This is the quiet mind. Calm thoughts, sharp conclusions.